In this video, I discuss the top 10 money mistakes to avoid in retirement. Coming up next on Holy Schmidt.
Holy Schmidt!
One of the things about being human is that you make mistakes. In fact, none are more common, frankly, than money mistakes. In the course of an ordinary day, an individual might make half a dozen mistakes when it comes to their money. This video will help you identify 10 very common money mistakes that retirees make. Stick around to the end because the last one is absolutely the most important and could cost you tens of thousands of dollars. Now let's get into it, but before we do, please make sure you click subscribe and click notifications so that you get alerted the next time I post a video. I post about twice a week. Point 10 is taking Social Security either too early or too late. There's a trade-off when you take Social Security, and that's the trade-off of time and money. The longer you wait to draw on Social Security, the larger your payment, but the less years you have to enjoy those payments. If you look at my recent video, I'll include a link in the description below. I ran a poll right here on YouTube, and the poll was which of these 5 reasons you would choose to take Social Security early. Now, granted, the poll was, of course, slanted towards people who take Social Security early, but overwhelmingly 56% of the people said they take Social Security early because they want to enjoy their time in retirement. They note that you have more energy and mental acuity in the earlier years of retirement, and that was important to the respondents. It is worth noting that if you take Social Security at age 62, break even is age 78 and a half, roughly 78.6 years, and the longevity of the average male at age 62 is 82, and the longevity of the average female at age 62 is 84. Number 9 is retirees' desire to save every dollar that they have and not spend any of it. I call that the Scrooged savings approach to retirement. They do this more than likely to save the money for their heirs, their children, brothers, sisters, etc. There's actually nothing wrong with this if it makes the retiree happy, but the problem comes when they save so much of their money that they are living in bad conditions in order to maintain the savings. I saw this a few years ago when I was in town for a reunion at my business school, Kellogg, in Chicago, and I caught up with an old mentor of mine. It had been a few years. I stopped by to say hello, almost unannounced. I called him about an hour before I came over, and the first thing that I noticed was that his house was ice cold. There were space heaters strategically placed throughout the house next to chairs and couches, but the home itself was very cold. The heater was barely working. I asked him about this, and he indicated that everything was fine, but it was very clear that things weren't fine. As we got into it, I asked him about his finances. I was genuinely concerned. This is a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, and he said that he had saved a lot of money, but he was saving it for his children. In most cases, when I give people advice, I give them options, but I don't insist. In this situation, I insisted. I called a very reputable heating and air conditioning company, and over the course of the next few days, we replaced the heating and the air conditioning in his home. Interestingly, I caught up with him about a year later, and his health had improved dramatically. He looked 20 years younger. He was acting 20 years younger. He was sharp. It was very, very good. Point number 3 is believing that in retirement, because you have extra time, you now can beat the market. I called this the super trader syndrome. The fact is, 4 out of 5 money managers whose job is to outperform the S&P 500 index cannot do it. I'm not saying that retirees can't beat the market, but what I am saying is don't conflate having extra time and the ability to study companies and charts with having the ability to outperform the market, because they are not the same thing. The next point is not considering taxes when looking at asset distributions. This is particularly dangerous your first year. When you go into retirement, you have, many people have anyway, a 401k or an IRA or both, And traditionally, unless it's a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA, when you withdraw the funds, you have to pay taxes on the amount that you withdraw. It's different than when you're employed. When you're employed, you receive a paycheck and your employer takes out the taxes from your paycheck. When you're in retirement, you're responsible for providing the tax payment to the government yourself. So just be careful. Year one is your calibration year. We'll talk about that again a little later. Make sure that as you're taking money out, that you do in fact set aside taxes for Uncle Sam. The next point number 6, is taking advice from friends on where to invest your money. At the end of January of this year, 2021, there was an internet chat room talking about the Davy and Goliath syndrome, where all of the professional investors in New York and globally didn't like a particular company, and this group of small investors decided that they were going to buck the system and buy the shares while the professional investors were selling the shares. They all got together, and at the end of January, over the course of 2 days, they drove the share price up 1,700%. It went from about $20 a share to $350 a share, just under $350 a share. 2 days in, I got a phone call from a friend, a good friend of mine, and he told me about the stock. He told me it was going to the moon. I think that was a direct quote. I quickly looked it up and realized that the stock was moving because of buying and selling, not because of fundamentals or information that was just released into the market to drive the share price up. So I told him to stay away. I did get interested in following the stock, but not for the reasons that you would think. It wasn't for investing, but frankly, it was because not only did my friend mention it, but a few family members called me up too, and they asked me what I thought. I told them the same thing. But I also knew that this would make for a great video at some point in the near future. I started reading stories in prominent newspapers about kids, really 18, 19, 20-year-olds that were asking their parents to take money out of their home equity line of credit to invest in this for sure bet that they were placing. Predictably, it didn't end well. After 2 days, the share price started to drop, and then it went into free fall over the course of the next basically 2 weeks and closed down at about $40 a share. So it peaked at $350 a share, $347 if I'm remembering the numbers correctly, and then down to $40. And people were buying it all the way up and selling it all the way down. That's a recipe for losing a lot of money. The next point is being too conservative. What do I mean by that? Retirees typically take their retirement portfolio and they move it from more aggressive investments to less aggressive investments 3, 4, 5 years before retirement. This is done because you don't want the market to cycle against you when you need the funds the most. However, retirement is long, and people entering retirement often live 20, 30, even 40 years or more, depending on when they retire and their health. And so the strategy of putting everything into conservative investments because you're not going to have the time for any recovery may not work or may not be appropriate anyway for some individuals. This is particularly true if a retiree has excess assets. Under those circumstances, it might make sense for the retiree to consider the level of risk they are willing to take in their portfolio. The next point number 4, I call mismanaged money. Basically, what this means is in retirement, people spend differently than when they're working. Some expenses go up, some expenses go down. If you look in the description below, I provide links to 2 videos. The first is 7 expenses that go down in retirement. The second is 10 expenses that go up in retirement. Basically, the gist of both of those videos is that sometimes, if you have extra time, you can do some of the things that you would have paid somebody else to do for you yourself. Other times, the extra time gives you a lot of time to spend money on things that you wouldn't have had time to spend money on before. Point number 3 is related, and that is your first year in retirement. Don't get the spendies. That's a non-technical term, but basically it means that for 40 years you've been saving for this moment, and in your first year of retirement, you're going to unleash don't do that. The reason is because a lot of times people don't know how much they actually spend when they have the spendies. They just know that they have the itch to spend, and so they go out and they do a lot of it. Point number 2 is not being on the same page as your spouse. There's a saying which is absolutely true about money, and that is that a couple needs to be on the same page about how they're going to spend money. Otherwise, you may end up funding two different types of, in this case, retirement, what you want and what your spouse wants. And point number 1, really important, and that is supporting your adult children, your capable adult children, at the expense of your own well-being. Now let me explain. In the example I used before, I talked about my mentor who had developed pretty significant health problems because he had let the need to save his money trump his need to maintain his health. Well, it doesn't just work with savings, it also works with your day-to-day cash flow too. If you find that you are neglecting your health and retirement in general, then it might be time to slow down the support that you're giving to your adult child. Now, there are exceptions to this, of course. These revolve around a child that doesn't have the ability to support themselves. In that instance, I would recommend talking to a professional financial planner and ask them to help you with this situation. And I do have to mention this. Sometimes when you extend a lifeline to someone who has the capability of working and they don't work, what was a good thing turns into an entitlement. In that instance, talk to someone that you're close to, particularly if you feel like you're somewhat trapped in the situation. Talk to a friend, talk to a family member that you can trust, and ask them for help and advice. If you like this video, please make sure you click subscribe and notifications. Retirement information is changing fast, and I work very hard to get what's out there and here for you. Also, check out this video on 5 reasons to rent your home versus own your home in retirement. This is Geoff Schmidt. Thanks for watching.